Bonjour tout le monde. Bonjour. Vous m'entendez très bien, je crois. Nous sommes heureux d'accueillir aujourd'hui les participants et les intervenants à ce webinaire sur l'accélération de la transformation numérique de l'enseignement supérieur en Méditerranée. Nous avons la chance d'avoir avec nous une grande diversité d'acteurs. Tous sont concernés par un processus qui s'est accéléré ces derniers temps suite aux mesures de confinement et la conséquence introduction en urgence de l'enseignement à distance. Passé le temps de la réflexion, il est maintenant le temps d'agir et de réfléchir ensemble à ce qui s'est passé et à l'impact que peuvent avoir ces changements sur la façon d'enseigner, d'apprendre, d'échanger, d'entrer en relation les uns avec les autres. Il s'agit aussi de déceler les opportunités que cette crise peut apporter pour l'amélioration de la qualité et de l'accessibilité de l'éducation. Pour nous aider dans cette tâche, nous avons avec nous des représentants de la Commission européenne, de l'Erasmus Student Network, de l'Université euroméditerranéenne de Fès, du réseau Unimed, de l'Agence universitaire de la francophonie, du projet Blue Skills, de la Banque européenne pour la reconstruction et le développement et de l'OCDE, que je remercie pour leur disponibilité et leur appui à notre travail à l'UPM. Les interventions porteront sur les leçons apprises ces derniers temps, mais aussi sur les enjeux d'avenir. Technologie et qualité de l'éducation, pratiques d'apprentissage centrées sur l'étudiant, internationalisation à domicile, transfert et échange des cours et de programmes, développement professionnel des enseignants, ressources éducatives libres. Et sans m'attarder encore plus, permettez-moi de passer la parole à son Excellence, M. Nasser Kemel, le secrétaire général de l'UPM, qui, malgré un agenda chargé, surtout maintenant parce qu'on s'apprête à accueillir la semaine prochaine plusieurs événements qui s'insèrent dans le cadre de la célébration du 25e anniversaire du processus de Barcelone, il a tenu bon à être avec nous et partager avec nous quelques idées. Monsieur le secrétaire général, vous avez la parole. Merci.
Merci à Ataf de m'avoir introduit. Et j'ai saisi l'occasion pour dire à tous nos participants aujourd'hui, bienvenue à l'Union pour la Méditerranée, même si c'est virtuel. Et je donnerai ou je ferai ou je présenterai mes remarques en anglais. Je sais que vous avez la possibilité de passer d'une langue à une autre. So let me start by all the this impressive list of participants in terms of institutional participation, in terms of the quality of experts and high-level officials who are participating in this webinar, which is a very important subject. And let me say that digitalization is not only greatly important for the higher education sector, but it is one of the main drivers of our work at the UfM for this year and the next few years. We know very well that digitalization is very important for our citizen to be able to accede to the job of the futures. And we know that in the next 20 or 30 years, some of the jobs we have today will disappear and new ones will come into the fray. So no sector is more in need of a leap in this particular and this strategic field than the higher education sector. You represent, those who are participating with us today, a diversity of stakeholders, starting, of course, from the first target of our work, which are the student, the professor and the teacher, and also the university themselves and the network that group them together, and of course, the European Commission, and especially its Erasmus dimension. We know that the current process of digital transformation should involve the entire higher education system, and that's why you represent all the different segments of that ecosystem. And you are here, and I hope, and I'm sure you will be able to define the priorities and what need to be done in the future. You are all aware, and we are too, of course, that digital transformation affects many aspects of the whole process of higher education, starting with academic mobility, our mode of learning, how we train our teacher, as well how we invest in the infrastructure of our universities and higher education institutions. As the process of digital transformation involves, as I said, the whole education system, we need to be involved and cooperate so those changes will have a real impact in improving the quality and the inclusiveness of education. As you all know, and my dear colleague Atav mentioned, next week we will be celebrating the 25th anniversary of the Barcelona process. This milestone in cooperation between the two shores of the Mediterranean. It was launched, as you all know, in 1995 and led at a later stage to the creation of the Union for the Mediterranean. The main objective of our action at the UfM in the field of higher education and research has been the promotion of youth employability and, of course, student mobility. We are also conscious that these priorities were defined a long time ago, as the last Euro-Mediterranean Ministerial Conference, which took place a long time ago, and I think it is about time that we start thinking about a new one. It was in 2007. The current crisis that we're facing today, which is, as you all know, the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, makes it more urgent than ever for the need to gather again as UfM member state in order to define an action plan on higher education, and within that, of course, on digitalization. Higher education is facing many challenges in the region, and digital transformation is certainly one of them, but also one of the answers. Many other issues should be discussed, such as women access to higher education, and also bridging the gender gap in science and technology. Our role at the UfM is to bring you as stakeholder together, especially those who are impacted by digital transformation in higher education, and supporting the definition of a common strategy. It entails reassessing priorities concerning investment in infrastructure and also in human resources within the university themselves, but also at the national and international level. Once again, I want to stress that UfM will do its best to support the higher education institution and the whole sector in this common effort. And I hope that this webinar will help us define ways of working together to meet all the challenges that we're facing ahead. Thank you for being with us today, and I'm sure your discussion will be an inspiration for our work in terms of defining our priority and designing our strategy for the future. Thank you very much.
So now we have with us, as the Secretary General said, 8 actors of higher education and digital transformation of higher education. So each one of them will share about their experience these last months during the COVID crisis, and also give some clues about this topic. We will start with the students, since they are the direct beneficiaries of education, with Kostis Giannidis, the president of the Erasmus Student Network, who will share with us also how he sees this issue, and on the topic of the internationalization of at home, basically. Go ahead, Kostis, you have the floor.
Yes, good morning, everyone, and thank you very much, Joao. Thank you also to the whole UfM Secretariat, the Secretary General, the board, and everyone who made this event possible. And most of all, thank you for trusting the students and trusting us to be in a very important event like this. I would like to share with you some of my observations and my comments related to the whole aspect of digitalization, because we, as the Erasmus Student Network, we have received many messages from international students or local students throughout the pandemic. And we know more or less what is the trend and how do they feel about this whole situation. For those who do not know Erasmus Student Network, I will briefly say that we are a network of student organizations that represent and support international students. Currently, we are in 42 countries within the European higher education area, but we support many international students who are coming from the South Mediterranean to Europe to undertake their student mobility experience. And we are also, in the past 2 years, in contact with the Union for Mediterranean, with the Union of Mediterranean Universities and other actors in the region in order to provide our student perspective in matters related to internationalization of higher education. From this perspective, I want to highlight that yes, indeed, the COVID-19 had a huge impact on the field of internationalization of higher education, and most importantly, it had a lot of impact on student mobility. There were thousands of students who left stranded abroad in another country when the pandemic started. And this caused many problems. And I can imagine that for those students who went further, and so for those students who went to very different cultural backgrounds, it was much more difficult. Those students who decide to go on a mobility, it's because they want to become more internationalized as persons, as people. They want to open their horizons. They want to open their minds. This is why they choose to go on student mobility. However, due to the pandemic, we saw that there are some alternatives to internationalization, and there are some combinations that we can, let's say, enhance the student mobility. So the digital and online learning played a very important role during this time, because those international students, they could, for example, follow online courses and online classes due to the fact that they couldn't attend the campus and the universities. And in the current semester, many students, unfortunately, they didn't have the chance to go abroad to study in another country. I'm talking either to south mobility or to south north or north to south, doesn't matter. Many students, they didn't have, unfortunately, this option. But there is another option now, which is offered by many universities, and this is the option of studying online. I just want to say at this point that we at the Erasmus Student Network, and at least from what we know from students, we believe that physical mobility and online learning, it's not the same thing. we cannot argue that we can replace physical mobility with online matters or online methods, because I'm sure that you can imagine that that students, they want to actually travel across borders. They want to actually travel to go to another country to meet new cultures and to make new friends. So we believe that online learning should not be a replacement of physical mobility, but on the other hand, it should be a complementary factor. So in order to enrich this experience, online learning and physical mobility should be combined. And this is something that it was a trend that started many years ago, but the pandemic accelerated this and made it more even much more relevant. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, student mobility is just one factor of internationalization. There are many other ways that we can be internationalized, and we can internationalize our universities and our curricula, and this is mostly through online teaching methods. The only problem is that online teaching, it's not that easy as some of us thought a few months ago. Because in order to have the proper infrastructure for online teaching, it's very costly. You need to have the right tools. The professors and the students, they need to have the skills and the competencies to be able to learn online. So these things are not easy. But we believe that we should work towards this direction, because in the future, the online learning and online teaching can be a very nice way of internationalization, due to the fact that unfortunately we cannot send all the students abroad due to lack of resources and due to lack of funding. That's why I believe that universities, they should prioritize in creating curricula to embed in this curricula internationalization elements. So for their local students to be together with foreign students in the same class, exchange ideas, and tackle societal issues and challenges in order to become better citizens and become citizens of the world. This is why we at the Erasmus Student Network, we want to support decision makers, policy makers, universities, in order to give them our perspective on how we can make a course or a curricula more international, and how we can offer this internationalization at home to the students of universities. So do not hesitate to approach us. Do not hesitate to ask the opinions of the students. We also encourage you to approach the student organizations that you may have in your universities or in your countries, and talk to them, discuss together, involve them in the internationalization strategies, in order to be able to help you and you to help us to create a more innovative teaching method in the years to come, and in order to be able to provide more skills and internationalization to students, which, as you know, those are skills that recruiters now they ask. So if we want to boost youth employability and student employability, then we have to address this kind of direction. That was from my side. Thank you very much to UfM once again for inviting me, and I'm very happy to hear also the rest of the speakers.
Thank you so much, Kostis, for this highlights on the involvement of students and the need of design strategies together with students. I will give the floor now to the European Commission, Veronica Mobilio, who will present us also how technology can support quality and the inclusiveness of education. The floor is yours, Veronica.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Thanks for the invitation. I hope you can see my presentation. I have a few slides to support the presentation that I'm going to make on the Digital Education Action Plan that the Commission adopted at the end of September. And I will be digging into the topic of technology supporting quality and inclusive education. So this is the political context where we adopted the digital education action plan. There are 3 or 4 elements which are very important. In line with the political guidelines of the President of the Commission, the new Digital Education Action Plan is part of the strategy for Europe Fit for the digital age. The Digital Education Action Plan that we adopted come after another one that we had in 2018-2020. In the meantime, of course, the COVID-19 crisis came up and this arrived with, of course, some big use of distance and online learning. And then the last point is that the action plan is part of the Next Generation EU recovery. Considering this political context, these are the key aspects of the Digital Education Action Plan. The first point is very important because basically we suggest an integrated approach for technology use in education. Sorry, 1 second. I'll try to speak without headset because I have echo and this is very distracting for me. So can you confirm that you can hear?
Yes, we can see the slides very well.
Okay. No, sorry, because I have a echo and I can hear myself coming after I speak, so it's very difficult to keep up, but in this way it's much better. So I was saying that basically in the new Digital Education Action Plan, we suggested an integrated approach for technology use in education, which means that we see the use of technology and the improvement of digital skills as 2 sides of the same coin. We cannot really use technology in education if we don't work in improving digital skills. The new action plan that we presented, compared to the previous one, is longer in duration until 2027 and is extended in scope, which means that covers formal education, but also non-formal education and lifelong learning. The action plan is based on 2 strategic priorities. On one side, we try to foster the development of a high-performing digital education ecosystem. And on the other side, we want to enhance digital skills and competencies for the digital transformation. So the first priority looks at key enabling factors like infrastructure, connectivity, but also competencies of teachers and educators, content, and so on. The second one looks at the digital education, competencies gaps. We aim to foster digital literacy and digital competencies from basic to advanced. The 2 strategic priorities need to be seen contributed to one specific goal, which is boosting high quality and inclusive digital education. But today, considering the topic of this conference, I would like to take a step back and with you to look at the fundings of the stakeholder consultation that we run to inform the Digital Education Action Plan. In fact, the initiative is based on very wide stakeholder consultation with the education and training sector, but also with the whole society, including an open public consultation that gathered 2,700 replies from different stakeholders, including parents, students, the private sector, and so on and so forth. This is the picture that comes out from the consultation. The COVID-19 crisis has led to the first experience of online and distant learning for many educators and education and training staff and learners. In the emergency, we saw example of innovation and scale, of course, but we also saw practices which were not optimal, let's say, which highlighted the need to boost digital capacity at all levels of education. Despite there is a different perception between education and training staff and parents and learners when it comes to the effectiveness of the measures that were put in place, the positive side is that all stakeholders see the COVID-19 crisis as a turning point for education and training. So something that will have a very strong and long-term impact on education and training. Of course, deepening socio-economic inequalities and creating new divides emerged as a main concern, because in the past months, the experiences of online and distance learning were put in place very quickly, without planning, without adequate resources, and so on and so forth. The other two elements, one is quite obvious, the other one a little bit less, is that support for mental health emerged as a crucial need for students. And of course, digital competencies come out as a very strong element that we need to boost in this situation and for the future of the labor market and our society. This is the overall picture that we see from the fundings of the open public consultation. But I think it's very interesting in this context to look at what we found out for the higher education sector. So the positive news on this is that if we compare the solutions put in place between schools and web providers and the ones of universities, we can see a higher level of preparedness, a higher level of digital readiness, because basically in many cases, the lessons continued virtually to streaming and use of existing learning management system. However, what we saw is that there are many differences between universities when it comes to digital capacity. So there are gaps within universities, but also across institutions. During the COVID-19 crisis, the higher education sector had specific challenges connected to assessment, but also how to keep engaged the students and how to adapt instructional design to online learning. As for other levels of education, the COVID-19 crisis has accelerated the digital transformation that some institutions were preparing for or undergoing prior to the crisis. However, the system-wide take-up of effective digital education practices remains slow and needs to be supported from different points of view. If we look at the big picture, higher education institutions are called to respond to growing lifelong learning needs. In this context, online learning can be part of the solution, because it can be used to open up higher education to a wider audience. And we also need to consider, for instance, that in the OPC fundings, online learning, the use of online learning is expected to be one of the most popular formats that will be used in the future. However, if we look at what was present before COVID, so before COVID, it was very clear that universities had a clear trend in integrating blended learning in their formal education offer. During COVID, what we saw is that the use of online formats increased, but it was very clear also the need for high quality digital education content, which require careful instructional design and planning. Now, when it comes to this specific topic, so the ability to design high quality content to be delivered online, the situation of higher education institutions is very different. We can take the example of MOOCs, for instance, where basically we see that European countries are late adopters and highly dependent on non-EU countries for the provision of MOOC, which means that we need to boost high quality and inclusive digital education content that is multilingual, accessible, and based on high quality instructional design. But of course, we also need to go beyond that, because digitalization doesn't cover only the online provision of content, but it covers many more other aspects which are crucial for the higher education landscape. So, and for that, we need strong leadership, and we also need an integrated strategy that considers technologies as a key enabler for all processes and activities of higher education institutions. This is basically what comes out from the fundings of the stakeholder consultation that we organized in preparation of the action plan. And here you can see an overview of the different actions that we suggested in this digital education action plan that we adopted at the end of September. Now, of course, I cannot go through all the actions because of time, but the ones that you see highlighted in bold are the ones that target specifically the higher education sector. They go from supporting the production of high quality content and the creation of expertise on instructional design. They support the development of strategies on digital education and on the integration of technologies in universities' processes and products. They also consider emerging technologies as AI, and they also look, of course, at boosting the basic and advanced digital technologies competencies, in different cohorts of students and people. I would like to conclude my part saying, reminding that the Digital Education Action Plan is of course part of the European education area. And within the European education area, we will be targeting the digital transformation agenda of the higher education sector even more widely in order to put together an agenda for them to boost the digital transformation. This will be done, of course, together. We will work with the higher education sector and the research communities and member states to co-create an ambition agenda for the digital transformation to be proposed by the end of 2021. So this is what I wanted to describe today. Thanks a lot for the invitation, and I'm happy to reply to questions if any.
Thank you so much, Veronica, for this presentation of the action plan. Will be really useful to define strategies in our higher education systems, and which is very comprehensive, and it will be really helpful. So I now pass the floor to Biljana Radonjic from the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, who will present the activity they undertake, and also something on open educational resources. The floor is yours, Biljana.
Thank you very much. I hope you hear me. Yes?
Perfect, thank you.
Can you hear me? Thank you. Okay, so thank you very much for inviting me to speak at this event. I will give you some information about what EBRD does in this area. Well, to start with, we can all agree that the COVID pandemic has considerably increased the pace of digital transformation across all sectors of the economy around the world. In the education sector, it has a transformational impact on the demand for online learning in primary and secondary schools, and also, of course, in universities. In the higher education sectors in the Mediterranean, digitalization trends have been definitely accelerating prior to the COVID crisis and especially during the pandemic. However, the uptake is still low in parts of the region. What are the key reasons? First of all, there are clear gaps in internet access and use in the Mediterranean compared to the rest of the world. The Inclusive Internet Access 2020 ranks countries such as Lebanon and Egypt among the least inclusive economies globally due to their low internet affordability, availability, relevance, and readiness. Secondly, even when digital transformation is happening in higher education in the Mediterranean, this doesn't automatically mean accessible online learning. Gender gaps in internet access, especially prevalent in countries such as Egypt and Morocco, is an important barrier to inclusive online higher education. Also, online learning can be inaccessible for students in conflict-affected areas, those from lower-income households, young people with disabilities, and other groups. The concern we have is that the pandemic seems to be widening digital gaps even further among higher and lower income countries and among genders, especially for women who have been increasingly vulnerable during the pandemic. But besides structural limitations on internet access, many institutions are poorly prepared to deliver content remotely. This is because of limited availability of digital infrastructure, as we heard from other speakers, equipment and platforms at the university. But also we find weak digital literacy among students and faculty. Finally, many universities lack suitable course content, curricula, and teaching methodologies, which are compatible with online and virtual training delivery. So what does the EBRD do in this area? Supporting a sustainable and inclusive digital transformation and digital skills is a strategic priority for the bank. We have just reconfirmed this commitment in our newly approved strategic and capital framework. This is EBRD's strategic roadmap for 2025. With digitalization and equality as 2 out of 3 key priorities, our shareholders approved that the bank should concentrate on opening up equal opportunities to all in an inclusive digital economy. So the EBRD will step up its current effort in bridging the digital divide and deploying new technologies to benefit our key inclusion target groups, which are women, youth, and people in remote regions, as well as people with disabilities, migrants, older workers, and other disadvantaged groups. We do this through our investments. These are normally long-term commercially priced loans and equities, and also through our donor-funded technical cooperation advisory support to the bank's private and public sector clients and to our governments for necessary policy reforms. EBRD's approach to inclusion and digitalization is distinctive. We leverage the relationships we have with our private and public sector clients to design and implement impactful inclusion interventions such as trainings and work-based learning on digital skills, occupational skills standards, and national skill strategies at the enterprise level, at the sectoral level, and at the national level. And this is done in close partnerships with schools and universities, as well as with municipalities and national governments in a number of our countries of operations. For example, we have provided support for the development of digital capacities of SMEs and corporates in a range of sectors, both through our capital investments for digital transformation and also technical advice for the development of digital skills, and by working with education institutions, between companies and education institutions. In Tunisia, for example, we have supported technology startups through advice and selective finances in order to enhance their access to entrepreneurship and skills for young people. We have also done some capacity building of business accelerators to leverage high engineering and ICT graduate potential in the Mediterranean regions. At the policy level, we have provided legal advice on developing a fintech regulatory framework. Also, we have invested in making ICT infrastructure more accessible, safe, and inclusive across the region. In Jordan, we have worked with the Greater Amman municipality to modernize infrastructure and municipal services, including the application of ICT, which will serve Amman citizens, schools, and universities very well. Outside of Mediterranean regions, we are supporting digital skills platforms in the Western Balkans region and online teaching methodologies in Kazakhstan, together with our partner, European Training Foundation. So what does higher education in the Mediterranean need for a successful transformation? First of all, collaboration and coordination is needed to make sure that digital transformation needs of universities are compatible with the government investments in digital infrastructure and technology. There is obviously a need to achieve universal internet coverage, which governments are mainly responsible for, but also to support availability and accessibility of online higher education resources. At the same time, many universities are at the crossroads at the moment, deciding whether to invest more in physical or virtual campuses, and their next move will have considerable impact on students and faculties. For example, EBRD's recent report on broadband and communications in the Mediterranean showed that the most successful were those governments that adopted a variety of measures in close cooperation with education institutions during the COVID-19. Interventions such as providing free internet packages, free access to e-learning, increased access to more affordable mobile services and products were crucial to secure continuity of learning during the crisis and access to education. In addition, we need to consider ICT investment trends in the Mediterranean when thinking about the direction that higher education institutions need to take. Mediterranean countries are following global ICT trends, but skewing more towards mobile rather than fixed network infrastructures. So universities need to harness the power and prevalence of mobile phones and smartphones in the region in order to deliver educational content and provide learning that is both appealing and accessible to students. This would be very good for greater access to higher education in remote regions, for example. Also, digital technologies can provide opportunities to support more inclusive education. For example, text-to-speech accessibility function can support students with disabilities to become more integrated into online learning platforms. Growing availability of fully digital degrees can, for example, offer refugees, migrants, and other vulnerable groups flexible and accessible pathways into higher education and afterwards into employment. But there is one area that other speakers have also mentioned that requires special attention. Digital transformation cannot be achieved without adequate ICT infrastructure, platforms, and equipment at universities, without teachers' training and institutional capacity building. Faculty and management of universities require training to operate successfully online classrooms and services in a way that is engaging and interactive for students. Existing curriculum and teaching methodologies need to be revised and adapted to both online delivery and a blended learning approach, using both online and in-person instructions. Also, we need to ensure increased digital literacy and equitable access to digital skills, but particularly for young women and students for disadvantaged backgrounds. How can the private sector get involved? So I mentioned partnerships between universities and companies, but also important with tech providers, especially EdTech, education technologies, are crucial to offer more successful online learning. Global tech market is booming before COVID and after COVID, both globally and in the Mediterranean. I have some numbers, but I would not go through them. The greater shift towards distant learning caused by COVID have led to even bigger surge in the EdTech market. So EdTech companies have an important role to play in supporting universities to evolve using new technologies to present course material through video content, through virtual reality, augmented reality, gaming, etc. And also assessment of learning outcomes through, by using data, greater data that is available. So many university and EdTech companies already are partnering in the region. So new technologies are used to offer virtual labs for students in STEM subjects, access to engaging speakers from around the world. We've all seen the front row seats at the relevant international events that are happening. For example, they are now accessible to students. But there is definitely room for larger scale international and regional partnerships among governments, universities, and technologies companies to accelerate digital transformation in higher education and make the latest technologies more accessible to average users. And just a few more things, what we do at EBRD. We support EdTech startup companies as part of our Star Venture program, which we support over 200 early stage companies in Egypt, Tunisia, Jordan, and Western Balkans across different sectors, including educational technology. We help startups access funds, advisors, mentors, accelerators, etc. In Jordan, we supported Little Thinking Minds, a company which creates digital solutions and resources for school-age children, including those accessible in low-resource areas. Outside of the region, in Kosovo, we helped Labbox, a company which helps school-age children to learn advanced skills and concepts in STEM subjects. And to conclude, building partnerships across the region and internationally between higher education institutions, the private sector, and the government is an opportunity to learn from our shared experiences navigating the COVID crisis and to reflect on the ways we are currently delivering education. partnerships can also turn this crisis into an opportunity for collaboration, so that digital transformation in our higher education and our economies can continue to evolve in the context of the future of work and continue to improve for the benefits of all students and learners in the Mediterranean and around the world. I will stop here.
Thank you so much, Biljana, and for this also optimistic breakthrough. And we all need a bit of hope nowadays, and it's good that you have opened this path. We will give the floor now to Raffaele Trapasso from OECD, who will also share about teachers' professional development, how to be close to teachers who have now to move towards a more digitalized mode of teaching. Go ahead, Raffaele.
Thank you, Chair. It's a pleasure to be with the Union for the Mediterranean today. Raffaele Trapasso from the Center for Entrepreneurship, SMEs, Cities and Regions. And I'm here with you today because the Center coordinates two projects. One is the Geography of Higher Education that has a focus on digital entrepreneurship ecosystems, and of course, together with the European Commission, HI Innovate, that you might be familiar with. Now, HI Innovate since 2018 has a digital transformation and capability dimension, and this is the reason why, again, I have been asked to respond to this twofold question. One is digital transformation with internal expertise from higher education institutions, and the other are the teachers' professional development, so the capacity building. So let's go to HI Innovate and its dimension. A very new dimension introduced only in 2018, as I said, that is basically taking into account three main points: culture and strategy within higher education institutions. So the importance of a strategic approach to digital transformation, to digital technologies that have to be at the core of the strategy of the institution. Then, of course, in investment, so how to implement this strategy and transform it into infrastructure and services. And third, a capacity building, so an empowerment of the community that is in the higher education institution. Before the COVID experience, we had only assessed the digital transformation and capability dimension in Italy, so only one case. And now all the ongoing higher education reviews have a focus on the digital transformation and capability dimension. So the problem is that we have very few lessons learned, and so it is more about learning lessons that we are currently doing, and I will communicate on that. A first key point concerning this capacity building and the digital transformation is about framework conditions. So it's about the potential of higher education policy in reality to be complementary, to have synergies with other policies, including the access to high-speed internet. This is very important, and we saw this in Sweden, where we are working. And the characteristic of the country is to have high-speed internet everywhere, including in remote areas. And this facilitates usually the transition on online education. It was a great asset during the COVID crisis. And then you can see the different role that higher education institutions play in central or in peripheral areas where they can generate, and we'll go back to that, also spillovers for their communities and their ecosystem. The second important lesson that we are learning at the moment is the more central role of IT services within higher education institutions. Before this was only people providing services. Now they have acquired a super important role to partner with professors, with teachers, because they have to experiment together new solutions to online learning. No one was expecting the pandemic. So when the pandemic arrived, also the attitude of teachers and professors changed, because now they are available to engage with their IT services, to experiment and to accept some green bananas that are not final product, but need to be developed, implemented by the use. And so they provide feedback to the IT services. And this, it has been seen everywhere where we have interacted with higher education institutions. And then the IT services also cooperate with researchers. They provide tailored services to researchers, tailored services to management, because it's not sufficient to PDF a document to be digital. There is a change that has to be operated in the process, and this represents another challenge for higher education institutions. And then something that we also understood in our interaction with case studies is the importance of students' communities in their milieu. So for local development, for regional development. And, there is a tension here. We can develop this perhaps in the discussion. There is a huge tension about the importance of retaining the student communities in areas, in places in which the presence of the university is also considered as a driver for local and regional development. But let's go to the second point of the question. So the digital capacity building, the digital pedagogies, because what we saw is a real change of paradigm. Let's talk about teaching. Some colleagues have already discussed about that. And, there were, before the COVID, when you were discussing teaching online, we were discussing mostly MOOCs, mostly things that were asynchronous. This is a nice definition that they gave in Greece, of course. Synchronous teaching and asynchronous teaching. And the kind of challenges were different. Now, it's not sufficient, of course, as we know, to record yourself to have and produce a MOOC to be effective, and is even more complex to provide engaging online teaching to students. So teachers are faced on a twofold challenge. On the one hand, they have to improve the content of their teaching in order to make it fit to the new digital environment. And then they have to support the students, is also this teaching, supports the students with their well-being. They have also to protect students from scaring effects that might, be generated by the discontinuity in the pedagogy. And they have also to assess the students, and the technologies that are currently available are not super efficient to avoid the cheating or to provide the students with a good experience when they do the examinations, where they are assessed in their activities. And then in some universities, especially, I have the example of the Klaipėda University in Lithuania. The university was also engaged not only to enhance the skills and the capacity building of professors internally, but it also engaged in the capacities of secondary teachers, primary teachers, trying to provide all students in the area with access to digital transformation. Now, let me conclude my intervention with a little bit of discussion about the challenges. What we saw is that, we can move online teaching, but there is a net loss, especially considering transversal skills. We were discussing a lot about entrepreneurship education. And we saw that it was very challenging for a lot of higher education institutions to retain an effective education in entrepreneurship. And this because you need contact. No, there is a famous private school in Paris, École 42, where the students are taught about coding, but in reality, in this school, there is no professor, there is no teachers that teaches us the students, because this school value very much their peer-to-peer interaction. And without that, this is impossible to be reproduced online. Then another point that it was mentioned already is the heterogeneity of the higher education institutions. So not all are engineering schools. There is a need of digital skills and competences also in art, in humanities, and is not always clear and easy how to transfer these programs online and how to equip professors with the digital skills they need. There is a plan about capacity building. The plan that we saw that was about capacity building for teachers was in the Democritus University in the Thrace region in the north east of Greece. And then the new blended approaches and the internationalization. I saw that Mr. Giannidis from the students' organization mentioned very much the importance of protecting this idea. This idea that students can still have an internationalization or an international experience mixed with online and mixed with other interactions with international networks. And this is an important point. And last but not least, there is an open door about ethics. Ethics in digital, in the digital transformation will be something very relevant and very important. What is clear, however, is that we are living in a moment of transition. So concerning the digital transformation, I would say that this is not the end. This is not even the beginning of the end. This is probably the end of the beginning of this challenge with the digital transformation and with the digital capabilities. Thank you again for inviting me, and thank you for giving me the possibility to address such an important network. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Raffaele. Valuable inputs. So we've listened to the students, to the European Commission, international organizations. So now we will give the floor to universities and networks of universities, and we will start with Unimed. I will give the floor to Cristina Stefanelli, in charge of the subnetwork e-learning. Go ahead.
Good morning. Good morning to everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you, UfM, for hosting this event, and thank you, Joao. Perhaps this is one of the best organized webinar in the pandemic. I'm Cristina Stefanelli. I work at Unimed, the Mediterranean Universities Union, where I'm responsible for the subnetwork on e-learning and open education and other projects and initiatives related to learning innovation. A few words about Unimed. Unimed is a network of 130 universities and research centers focused on promoting Euro-Mediterranean academic cooperation. We are based in Rome, in Italy, and we have regional offices in Morocco, Palestine, France, and Portugal. I would like to share with you today an initiative that we have conducted within the subnetwork in learning and open education, which is a smaller group, working group within the larger network. At the beginning of the pandemic, we have created an online space to collect stories, ideas, and quick fixes or long-term plans, whatever put in place by our university members and other universities in the region in response to the change brought by the pandemic in terms of online teaching and learning. The website is called Online Resilience, and it's available at onlineresilience.unimed.net. So analyzing these extraordinary stories, because it's been all extraordinary, keeping continuity in education, three main themes emerged. The students' engagement and motivation. It goes without saying that teachers struggled to motivate students through online classes, screens, etc. So probably we'll need to put education on a Zoom diet when the pandemic ends. I want to report a quote by Nezi Orton, a professor of Anadolu University. He said, "I have realized that my students at Anadolu University do not really feel very good to participate in online classes. They have been developing a negative attitude towards online education. So I decided to talk to them. And as a result, in my understanding," he said, "students are truly fed up with information overload. Where they live in limited spaces because of restrictions, they are overwhelmed with social media. They consume all their energy with screen media, and they are no longer energized for another screen-oriented education. So I talked to them on WhatsApp and discussed the subjects by phone. To me, it was more real and truly effective." So he touched on a very important point about the risk of developing a negative attitude towards online education and being technically and emotionally overwhelmed with screen time. Along these lines, I would like to share another story, the one of Coventry University in the UK. They have developed guidance to ensure teaching can be delivered online, focusing on care. It's called Care in Remote Teaching. It's composed by a set of guiding principles and recommendations. Be asynchronous, be realistic in prioritizing activities, in keeping things simple and intentional. Be clear in defining expectations in communication. Be empathetic, and this is perhaps the most important one. Setting reasonable workload, encouraging students to balance online and offline work, teaching with care, because probably students will remember how professors made them feel much more than the knowledge than they acquired during these emergency times. And be consistent, providing feedback, taking into consideration learning preferences, avoiding untested tools, which may lead to technical difficulties, frustrations, etc. So here, there is really very little about technology, and this brings us to the second theme emerged from our stories of online resilience. Technology alone will not transform education. We have mentioned this before. Today, digital transformation is indeed less about technology and much more about people, interactions, experiences, and mindsets. So the pandemic can be also an opportunity for all of us to rethink the role of technology, to separate truth from hype, and to understand what technology can and cannot really do to transform education. So the first element is perhaps that technology is not as disruptive as the EdTech enthusiasts imagined. So perhaps one of the interesting things that we have seen has been this transition from the old idea of disruptive technology into tools for mitigation, and in some cases also for inclusion and exclusion. So innovation is an incremental change. It doesn't need to involve high-tech solutions or super sophisticated devices, because most likely lower tech approaches will work well, or at least well enough. We have seen the WhatsApp example before, and other examples of countries using TV and radio to deliver educational contents. And technology is not as inclusive as we thought. There are many issues about equity. Equity in higher education is a challenge, also in the best of times, but simply expanding access to technology, which is of course of utmost importance, is not enough. We need to innovate pedagogy first, to improve learning, to make education truly inclusive and able to meet everyone's learning needs. And the last theme that emerged from our stories of online resilience is perhaps that universities are more resilient than we have imagined. So the sector has probably surprised itself. Since the very beginning of the pandemic, we have seen universities demonstrating an unpredictable ability to reinvent the ways they have been working for ages at an unprecedented scale and speed. Just to make an example, the Learning Center at An-Najah University, this e-learning center has been working for many years, created a task force to develop an emergency plan with different scenarios. And this has been done at the speed of light. They have spent 1 week to plan and to prepare the scenarios. And on day 1 of online learning, more than 80% of the students joined the online lessons. So this means that most universities have already accepted these transformations. They have already demonstrated that they have the ability, the power, the flexibility to manage significant transformations. This means that the technology, or at least the low-tech educational technology, is already in most cases already there, and in most cases can be enough. And most importantly, the teacher of the future is already here. So what we need to do now is to avoid that those quick fixes and emergency solutions become the new norm. We need to address issues such as social injustice, inequality, the digital divide, has been mentioned many times today, as well as concerns about surveillance, ethics, Raffaele mentioned this already, data privacy resulting from dependencies on online solutions. And goes without saying, we need to bring all the stakeholders together to build back better, to build the capacity of educators to innovate pedagogies, to move from this emergency education to sustainable innovation, to create ideas, to create new strategies, policies at institutional, national, and ideally at regional level in the Mediterranean. So we really need to work together. So thanks again, UfM, for organizing this event, which brings many people together to make this this holistic transformation, not only digital transformation, happen in our region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christina, for sharing these beautiful stories. And we know that out of the stories, we will be able to design concrete guidelines which will help everyone. I give the floor now to Professor Olfa Zeribi, qui est directrice pour l'Europe de l'Ouest, donc de l'Agence universitaire de la francophonie. Professeur, vous avez la parole.
Merci beaucoup. Et je voudrais... tout le monde m'entend? J'ai un écho, attendez. Je vais essayer de partager mon écran. Est-ce que vous m'entendez?
Oui, c'est parfait.
Bon, merci beaucoup. Donc, voilà. Avez-vous accès alors,
oui, c'est bon. Peut-être mettre en diapo, en grand d'écran.
En présentation. Bien, voilà. Moi, je voudrais tout d'abord, dans un premier temps, remercier les organisateurs pour la qualité des panels et pour l'intérêt d'associer plusieurs parties prenantes. Et j'ai été très sensible à tout ce que mes collègues ont dit. Et je voudrais aussi dire l'importance que cela a pour nous d'être présents aujourd'hui, parce que justement, il s'agit d'une occasion pour nous de partager des bonnes pratiques, de partager nos expériences et à partir de là, de voir comment pourrait-on construire, comment pourrions-nous co-construire pour le futur de façon à avancer. Alors, la deuxième remarque que je voulais faire est la difficulté, au-delà des remerciements, mais aussi la difficulté de passer après mes collègues qui finalement, de ce que je vois, ont absolument tout dit. Et je m'inscris totalement avec ce qui a été dit et l'essentiel et le fondamental et le plus important. Et j'aimerais pouvoir voilà, démarrer ma présentation là-dessus. Alors, peut-être un mot sur la UF très rapidement. C'est une organisation transnationale et ce qu'on appelle un peu le réseau des réseaux, puisque c'est un réseau d'universités qui se situe dans 119 pays et qui compte environ 1000 membres. Il s'agit d'une des associations la plus importante dans le monde. Alors, je voulais juste préciser comment nos implantations sont faites. Nous avons 10 directions régionales et qui sont situées dans les zones que vous voyez sur la carte colorée. Et nous sommes à la direction ici, la direction régionale de l'Europe de l'Ouest. Nous avons environ 200 membres, 200 universités et qui sont nos membres, mais également 13 pays. Bon, je pourrais en reparler tout à l'heure. Alors, nous attachons une importance particulière à la qualité de la formation. Ce sont nos axes, l'employabilité, l'insertion professionnelle, mais aussi comment avoir un impact et comment générer un impact pour relever les défis académiques et sociétaux. Cela fait partie de nos priorités. Alors, très rapidement, l'implantation de l'AUF que je représente et son potentiel vient d'être expliqué, je ne reviendrai pas là-dessus, mais ce qui m'intéresserait de dire, c'est en quoi notre réseau, et au regard de tout ce qui a été dit jusque-là, nous disposons d'un réseau numérique francophone extrêmement important, puisque nous avons ce qu'on appelle des campus numériques francophones, et nous avons aussi un institut qui est dédié à tout ce qui est en lien avec l'ingénierie du numérique. Et donc, ces espaces d'apprentissage et de pratique numérique sont à la fois dédiés à de l'expertise, de la formation, de la recherche, mais aussi ce sont des espaces qui sont ouverts et qui permettent à des étudiants, aux enseignants-chercheurs de se former au numérique et d'utiliser des nouvelles pratiques induites par le numérique. Ils sont aussi également des espaces pour permettre de relayer des projets nationaux et internationaux qui sont conduits par l'AUF et un intérêt, le focus est mis aussi dans la région, en tout cas pour la région de la Méditerranée. Ces espaces-là sont tout particulièrement dédiés à la question de l'employabilité, du développement de la certification sur des questions d'insertion professionnelle. Alors, mon introduction était trop longue, était en fait importante, mais il s'agissait aussi de présenter un peu le positionnement de l'Agence universitaire de la francophonie et pourquoi nous sommes là. Alors, lorsque j'ai écouté tout à l'heure nos collègues, et en particulier aussi Gianidis, et j'ai trouvé ce qu'il disait était très intéressant, parce que l'AUF a été, du fait de sa mobilité à l'international et de la mobilité sur les 1000 universités et réseaux, membres et réseaux, nous avons été au premier rang confrontés à la problématique justement de la mobilité et des questions liées à l'infrastructure numérique et aux ressources numériques d'accès. Et nous avons réalisé à quel point, et là je rejoins Giannitis, que la mobilité, elle doit continuer d'exister. il faut juste, et l'internationalisation doit continuer de se faire, et la globalisation aujourd'hui, le monde dans lequel nous vivons, qui est un monde globalisé, doit continuer d'exister de la même façon. Il faut juste que, il faudrait que aussi des cultures, des valeurs soient partagées, et qu'il ne s'agit pas uniquement de se déplacer, de faire de la mobilité pour se déplacer d'un lieu à un autre et de partager des savoir-faire ou de la connaissance d'un lieu à un autre, mais c'est aussi au-delà de ça, et c'est une diversité culturelle qui est aussi liée à cette mobilité. Donc ça, ce sont des partages aussi des valeurs et des cultures liées à une valeur, liées à nos valeurs. Alors, moi, j'aurais distingué entre ce qui relève du risque, mais aussi ce qui relève de l'opportunité, et le bilan est très mitigé. Il est très, très, très spécifique, et je vous dirai pourquoi. Il y a à la fois des risques, mais il y a aussi des opportunités sur chacun des points. Le premier point est que ne pas réduire un facteur qui est totalement conjoncturel, qui est lié à une accélération de la transition numérique, dans l'enseignement supérieur et la recherche, avec des considérations de type dans des catégories qui relèvent du structurel, dans la façon dont les systèmes nationaux de recherche sont organisés, des modes d'organisation des institutions. Il y a un phénomène effectivement d'accélération, mais ne doit pas occulter l'approche structurelle de l'organisation de ces systèmes. Le deuxième point est que le constat aussi très mitigé à notre échelle, le constat extrêmement mitigé d'un facteur qui est aggravant en fait, et qui va creuser un déficit sur l'accès à de l'infrastructure numérique, et a relevé l'idée d'une nouvelle fracture sociale qui est due au numérique, et donc qui rend la difficulté pour des publics qui sont des étudiants pauvres en ressources, enfin faibles, dont les ressources sont faiblement accessibles, ou un capital social ou relationnel insuffisant ou économique, ferait que la fracture sociale serait aggravée. Il y a aussi un bilan mitigé sur l'internationalisation des communautés de pratique. Là aussi, en termes d'accessibilité ou d'égalité des chances dans l'accès à ces communautés de pratique. Nous voyons aussi apparaître ce que nous pourrions appeler un bouleversement des modèles économiques éducatifs, justement liés à ces accès, à ces difficultés, parfois ces déficits financiers liés à ces accès, mais aussi avec de nouveaux acteurs émergents qui viennent sur les places de marché pour faire des propositions. Et nous voyons également, effectivement, sur le bilan mitigé, sur la question des ruptures, de différentes ruptures sur lesquelles je ne reviendrai pas, qui sont des ruptures sur des pratiques, des métiers, des modes d'organisation de l'activité pédagogique, etc. Bon, cela étant dit, il est important, de notre point de vue à l'AUF, d'être dans le soutien, d'anticiper ces transformations, d'être présent dans l'accompagnement et la facilitation de ces transformations, et aussi de voir dans le cadre des politiques publiques des pays, de voir comment nous pourrions apporter ce soutien, et cela est extrêmement significatif, en tout cas dans la stratégie sur laquelle nous sommes positionnés. Bon, alors je ne vais pas revenir évidemment sur ce que la transition numérique a induit, c'est un changement de relation, un changement de relation dans le rôle que peut avoir l'apprenant avec le chercheur, et avec des nouvelles possibilités de relation. Mais là où je reviendrai, et qui a été dit, est très intéressant, extrêmement pertinent, et que dans toutes ces nouvelles possibilités de plateformisation pédagogique avec des changements de modèle, de remise en cause de qualité de suivi et de l'apprentissage, mais de l'évolution des rôles, quel est le juste équilibre à trouver? Quelles sont les modalités de complémentarité? Comment on va réinventer la relation entre le présentiel et le distanciel dans l'apprentissage? Et quel est ce juste équilibre à trouver, et le bon dosage dans la relation de cela? Et ça, j'ai trouvé cela pour l'enseignement supérieur extrêmement utile en termes de réflexion. Sur le volet recherche et innovation, et je vais m'arrêter et je vais finir avec cette diapositive. on voit que le fait de... Cela a permis quoi? Cela a permis, cette transition, cette accélération de la transition digitale leur a permis d'aider des communautés de chercheurs à se structurer à l'international. Et cela est extrêmement positif, extrêmement positif. Il a aidé également, cette accélération a aidé à revisiter la conception des innovations en lien avec les publics, en lien avec la société civile, en lien avec d'autres acteurs ou d'autres parties prenantes qui ne sont pas uniquement des scientifiques à l'origine, au sens où est entendue la communauté scientifique, mais aussi en lien avec des politiques publiques, en lien avec la société d'une façon générale. Cela a reposé aussi et a réinterrogé la question des frontières disciplinaires. C'est-à-dire qu'on voit l'exemple de l'agritech, on voit l'exemple de l'utilisation de l'intelligence artificielle dans les sciences humaines et sociales, on voit toutes les applications et toutes les convergences que cela a reposé, en tout cas en termes de... il ne s'agit plus d'additionner des disciplines, mais il s'agit de construire des objets de recherche autour de disciplines communes et de mobiliser des acteurs qui sont issus d'origines disciplinaires ou scientifiques qui ne sont pas nécessairement les mêmes. Alors paradoxalement, alors je reviens toujours pourquoi je dis que ce bilan est très mitigé entre risques et opportunités, cela aussi a généré des inégalités entre les disciplines sur les questions d'accès à l'information et sur les questions de la production des données et la question en lien avec les sciences ouvertes et les mécanismes on a vu émerger de nouvelles compétences, comme vous l'avez dit, des compétences qui sont en lien avec les sciences des données, l'intelligence artificielle, les big data. Donc, tout cela fait que certaines disciplines se sont, d'une certaine façon, très favorisées par rapport à d'autres disciplines qui, elles, le travaillent plus sur de l'expérimentation, du terrain, de l'observation participante, des méthodes inductives en méthodologie, et qui ne supporteraient pas justement qu'il y ait ce décrochage avec le terrain et les territoires. Et enfin, la coexistence des temporalités qui ne sont pas identiques, des temporalités de la mesure, entre le moment où c'est l'instant immédiat, l'instant T, la question des calculs scientifiques qui sont les modélisations avec l'usage intensif de ces modèles de production de données en lien avec ce que les résultats peuvent apporter. Il y a aussi nous avons vu aussi que cette accélération aura reposé des questions d'intégrité scientifique, des défis éthiques et des enjeux de science et de société. Donc, pour finir, et je vous remercie de votre attention, je voulais juste préciser que dans le contexte, et conclure avec cela, il va être important je pense que les États, que les politiques puissent réfléchir en amont à la conception de à des stratégies institutionnelles pour un peu piloter et reconcevoir et faire le lien entre cette transition numérique avec les modèles économiques de développement qui souhaiteraient être mis en place derrière. Et l'AUF et l'Agence universitaire de la francophonie se situent aussi là pour accompagner, faciliter tous ces membres du réseau pour passer passer le cap de cette digitalisation, mais qu'elle va continuer d'être. Et je vous remercie.
Merci, professeur Zeridi, pour votre contribution. Nous passons maintenant la parole au professeur Ouazani Chadi, vice-président chargé des affaires académiques et culturelles de l'Université euro-méditerranéenne de Fès.
Merci monsieur, je suis très heureux d'être parmi vous aujourd'hui. Je vous remercie d'avoir associé l'Université euro-méditerranéenne de Fès à cet important webinaire. Permettez-moi tout d'abord de dire un petit mot sur notre université. Elle est sans doute l'un des projets phare de l'Union pour la Méditerranée. Et à ce titre, elle a été labellisée par ses 43 membres. Elle est placée sous la présidence d'honneur de Sa Majesté le roi Mohamed VI et elle a démarré véritablement ses activités en 2013. Elle compte aujourd'hui un petit peu plus de 1800 étudiants en formation initiale et également un certain nombre de groupes bénéficiant de formation continue dans différents domaines de l'industrie, mais aussi de l'action publique et de la gestion territoriale. Elle compte aujourd'hui 8 composantes, 4 écoles d'ingénieurs, dont un INSA, Euro-Méditerranée, co-développé et co-créé avec le groupe INSA France, et une école d'ingénieurs dédiée à l'intelligence artificielle et à l'ingénierie digitale. Elle compte également une business school, un institut des sciences juridiques et politiques et une faculté des sciences humaines et sociales. En dépit de son très jeune âge, l'université a su également développer une recherche de pointe et de très très bonne facture dans des domaines tels que l'énergie, l'environnement, l'eau, les matériaux, la fabrication additive. Elle a une production scientifique très appréciable et a vraiment noué des relations fortes avec les secteurs productifs de l'espace euro-méditerranéen et assure pleinement sa mission d'acteur de développement dans son territoire. Elle est installée depuis 4 ans dans son nouveau campus flambant neuf, un campus d'ailleurs toujours en construction, mais ce qui m'amène à dire que la question de la transformation numérique a fait partie, disons, du cahier des charges de l'université dès sa conception et a été un préalable à la réflexion menée pour son campus, mais également pour son projet en tant qu'université, donc établissement d'enseignement et de recherche. Son campus, et vous me permettrez de partager avec vous rapidement ma présentation. Voilà. J'imagine que vous l'avez devant vous.
C'est parfait, oui.
Très bien. Alors, donc, c'est un écocampus aujourd'hui connecté, en ce sens qu'il est doté d'une fibre optique qui parcourt l'ensemble de ces bâtiments et avec une dématérialisation très, très poussée de ces services. À ce titre-là, l'université a mis en place un système d'information qui permet à tous les usagers de l'université d'y accéder via un login et un mot de passe. Et tous les services sont dématérialisés depuis le dépôt de la candidature et du dossier de candidature jusqu'à la sortie, jusqu'à l'insertion professionnelle. C'est donc un système d'information très dynamique avec une planification pédagogique dématérialisée, un suivi de l'assiduité, un suivi d'évaluation. Donc, la question de la dématérialisation aujourd'hui n'est plus à l'ordre du jour. L'université a mis en place également une carte multifonction, qui est à la fois une carte d'identification, mais également une carte d'accès au campus, aux différents locaux, donc un accès différencié aux résidences universitaires. Et c'est aussi une carte de paiement de tous les services au sein du campus, qui fait que l'argent lui-même est dématérialisé en son sein. La question de la transformation numérique était également à l'ordre du jour quant à la réflexion du profil de ces lauréats. Aujourd'hui, l'université a défini ce qu'on appelle un profil Euromède et étant donné le temps relativement court qui m'est imparti, ce profil est donc basé sur 7 piliers. J'insisterai sur 2 piliers essentiels, celui de la mobilité qui exige de ses étudiants donc un séjour d'au moins une année à l'étranger dans l'espace Euromède et également un environnement numérique fort, comme je viens de le dire, avec un recours généralisé à ces technologies. Et en plus, bien sûr, des autres piliers que vous avez devant vous et que malheureusement, je ne peux pas développer dans le cadre de cette intervention. Mais en insistant sur ces 2 éléments, la mobilité et l'environnement numérique, jamais ces 2 éléments n'ont été aussi fortement associés en temps de la Covid. La mobilité aujourd'hui pour les étudiants de troisième année INSA est aujourd'hui assurée localement au sein du campus, mais grâce bien entendu aux technologies de l'information, les étudiants suivent régulièrement leurs cours comme s'ils étaient effectivement comme s'ils étaient dans le groupe INSA. Bien sûr, les enseignements aujourd'hui sont des enseignements où la question, où l'outil numérique est fort, mais il faut pas se le cacher, l'enseignement reste quand même resté, du moins en présentiel. Les enseignants se sont installés dans un certain confort du présentiel, même si ces outils fortement utilisés. Et puis, avec l'avènement de la Covid et du confinement qui sont suivis, nous avons véritablement vécu un tournant dans l'action académique de l'université. Et nous sommes passés par un certain nombre de phases. Déjà, un communiqué du ministère de tutelle a annoncé qu'à partir du 16 mars, tous les enseignements devaient s'effectuer à distance et nous nous sommes bien entendu pliés à cette exigence. Et dès le 16 mars, donc et la semaine du confinement qui s'en est suivie, nous avons déployé toute notre infrastructure et toutes nos équipes pour assurer la continuité pédagogique. Nous avons été effectivement confrontés à un double défi, celui de garantir un service académique à des étudiants qui payent leur scolarité, mais également le défi d'assurer l'équité pour nos étudiants boursiers qui sont nombreux, mais qui ne sont pas forcément dotés des moyens qui garantissent cette équité. Donc, en plus de l'enseignement à distance qui a été généralisé à partir du 16 mars, grâce notamment à l'appui de l'Union européenne et à la BEI, la Banque européenne d'investissement, nous avons pu bénéficier d'un don grâce auquel nous avons pu acquérir 460 ordinateurs PC portable avec des connexions 4G dans un espace record, étant donné les conditions du confinement de l'époque. Et ces moyens ont été remis aux étudiants boursiers afin qu'ils puissent également suivre le cours normalement comme tous les autres. Pour cela, il a fallu également déployer une logistique inédite qui s'est appuyée sur les autorités territoriales, sur les fondations partenaires de l'université qui ont servi de relais pour acheminer ces moyens, même dans les zones les plus enclavées du royaume. Nous avons également bâti notre système d'enseignement à distance sur un outil, l'Outlook 365, simplement parce que l'université a fait ce choix-là qui confère à tous ses usagers, quels qu'ils soient, une adresse professionnelle avec un suffixe euromed.org et grâce à la composante Teams d'Outlook 365 et à la plateforme Moodle, nous avons effectivement mené tranquillement et avec une certaine efficacité cet enseignement à distance généralisé. Nous avons par ailleurs déployé plus d'une trentaine de tutoriels à destination de nos étudiants, de nos professeurs qui n'ont pas l'habitude d'utiliser ces moyens et surtout à notre personnel administratif qui devait assurer la continuité dans les meilleures conditions possibles. Ainsi, nous avons pu maintenir pendant toute la période du confinement, qui était de 3 mois, c'est-à-dire du 16 mars jusqu'au 15 juin, un niveau un taux de réalisation de nos enseignements à distance qui a frôlé les 98% avec une moyenne de 95-96%. Et de la même manière, l'assiduité étant obligatoire pour nos étudiants, l'assiduité au cours étant obligatoire pour nos étudiants, même en période de confinement, nous avons pu garantir, grâce au suivi que nous avons mis en place, un taux de présence moyen, disons, de 76%, qui a atteint des pics de 83% par moment. Nous avons également assuré le suivi de toutes les séances d'enseignement à distance hebdomadaires et il y a des semaines où nous avons atteint un pic de 10 000 heures d'enseignement à distance, la moyenne étant aux alentours de 800 heures d'enseignement à distance. Et puis, À la fin, c'est de cette manière d'ailleurs que nous avons pu terminer notre programme d'enseignement pour toutes nos composantes, et c'est poser la question de l'évaluation, donc des examens. Et là encore, nous souhaitions effectivement que cette opération soit réalisée à distance. Et pour cela, nous avons entamé un certain nombre de consultations auprès des prestataires. J'en cite quelques-uns parmi vous, devant vous, comme Testuy, comme Blackboard, comme Zoom. Cette consultation n'a pas véritablement été concluante dans la mesure où les systèmes qui nous ont été proposés ne garantissaient pas une surveillance fiable pendant les examens. Nous avons même tenté de réaliser une solution maison, s'appuyant toujours sur le module Teams, auquel nous avons adjoint une composante en libre accès qui s'appelle Safe Exam Browser. Mais là encore, les conclusions n'étaient pas très bonnes, ce qui nous a amené, notamment, suite à l'évolution positive de la pandémie à partir du mois de juin, de décider de réaliser l'évaluation en présentiel. Mais là, disons, la stratégie a changé avec l'évaluation en présentiel, notamment à partir du mois de juillet. Nous avons dû déployer un protocole sanitaire extrêmement exigeant. Et grâce à ce protocole, toute personne accédant au campus se soumettait systématiquement à la prise de température par infrarouge. Les véhicules accédant au site étaient systématiquement désinfectés, des masques ont été distribués, les lieux désinfectés matin et soir, l'accès au bâtiment également soumis à la désinfection, des chaussures, des gels hydrauliques un petit peu partout ont été disposés, et une distanciation sociale a été maintenue dans les salles d'examen et dans les différents espaces utilisés pour les examens. Cette opération s'est déroulée dans d'excellentes conditions. J'ai oublié effectivement de dire que un test systématique de dépistage de tout le personnel a été réalisé avant le déroulement de cet examen, et nous avons fort heureusement réussi cette action sans constater de cas positifs pendant cette opération.
Merci, professeur. Nous sommes un petit peu en retard, donc si on peut conclure.
Alors, je vais rapidement conclure, simplement pour dire que malgré la disposition des moyens, disons que l'enseignement numérique n'a pas vraiment connu le développement qu'on souhaitait au départ. Mais grâce à cette pandémie du Covid, nous avons pu rapidement basculer sur un enseignement totalement à distance. Et je dois le dire aujourd'hui, nous sommes dans 3 configurations différentes. À la rentrée universitaire, l'université a décidé que tous les professeurs assurent leurs enseignements en présentiel, qu'une partie de ces enseignements pour les étudiants sont en présentiel, une autre partie en présentiel distanciel, et une partie également à distance pour ceux et celles de nos étudiants qui ont souhaité rester chez eux. Donc, nous sommes vraiment dans une configuration multiforme, et ceci nous a donné une certaine capacité, une certaine souplesse à envisager dès demain des formations en formation initiale et en formation continue à distance pour notamment d'autres pays, du Porto-Romède et du bassin et de l'Afrique subsaharienne. Tout cela pour dire que même si les moyens sont là, cette opération n'aurait pas connu le succès qu'elle avait si l'implication forte des enseignants dans l'action pédagogique n'était pas à l'ordre du jour. C'est une action différente, plus innovante, différenciée, centrée davantage sur l'apprenant et avec plus d'interactivité et plus de prise d'initiative. Et bien sûr, ce processus a été intégré à l'ensemble des formations, mais il est clair que certaines formations, notamment d'ingénierie, exigent quand même qu'il y ait du présentiel. Si je pense aux travaux pratiques, les travaux pratiques en distanciel ne peuvent pas tous être assurée. Et cela va également pour les projets tutorés, pour les projets et pour les projets de fin d'études. En conclusion, je dirais que la question de la transformation numérique aujourd'hui est d'actualité chez nous à l'université et le mérite revient bien sûr à toutes les ressources humaines qui se sont fortement impliquées dans cette action. Merci.
Merci, professeur, pour ce témoignage très, très concret sur les mesures mises en place à l'Université Euromède de Fès. I give the floor to our last speaker, last but not least, Professor Munir Gribi from the OGS Institute and in charge of the project Blue Skills. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much. I'm trying to launch my presentation. Okay, so thank you, and I'm very pleased to be here today with you. I was somehow very happy, but in the same time, a little bit sad of what is happening due to the pandemic situation, which let us in this moment thinking also about new schemes and models to change the way of providing higher education in the Mediterranean. So my talk will be about the online higher education to feed the blue jobs, the blue economy. And I will be talking about the Blue Skills, which is a project that has been labeled by the Union for the Mediterranean, which I really thank very much for all the support that they are giving us, particularly the higher education and research department that guide us in our way to be, of course, here today, but also in how to provide those skills that are needed really by our economy in the Mediterranean. The crisis, of course, has been very, very tough. And besides the socioeconomic situation that is really very bad in many of our countries, there should be today a strong policy response to those problems. And you can understand that a lot of jobs has been lost. We can understand that we are shifting towards new jobs. This was also said by the Secretary General of the Union for the Mediterranean this morning, the new jobs, what we call, but today also more. We need to think and to tailor new possibilities, new opportunities for youth and women. Our students should know from the beginning that through this pandemic situation, we need to find the opportunity instead of just responding to the crisis. And in fact, since the first lockdown in March, April, we have seen that there are a lot of scientific collaborations and partnerships. This is, let's say, somehow a good response already, because we have a lot of global scientific collaboration, maybe in this case, focused on the problem itself. So there are mostly people working on how to respond for the health care and for the scientific improvement of, let's say, these problems through labs and publishing papers. So you can see a lot of collaboration, scientific collaboration. And this already is an indicator of how sometimes crises push us towards more collaborative way of thinking. Of course, the impact will be devastating all our countries, and you cannot imagine how it is very tough and hard today to respond really to this problem. The business, particularly, for example, in Europe, we have seen a lot of people losing their jobs, and this has effetto domino, which means also a lot of consequences for other indirect involvement. Business are suffering from that, but also we are thinking of we change the behavior of consumers, and this is exactly what we are speaking. For us, the students also will be in somehow pushed towards maybe the use of new platforms. I will show some examples later on, but also we need to prepare ourselves on how to host them. For us, they are our main consumer and they are our main, let's say, target to build their capacities and develop their skills. Of course, we need to change, and changing is not easy, particularly in countries around the Mediterranean that are, of course, facing a lot of instability. Economic is one of them, but of course the political instability, this also is important. Nobody accepts the immediate change. We have the question, who wants to lead the change for developing new models? Everybody wants to change. Who wants to change really the situation? Nobody raised his hand, but who wants to lead this change? Everybody escaped from this point. So we need to find the possibility also to involve since the beginning our policymakers and our decision makers, because we, let's say, wish that one day the things will change in proper way, but we also want that somebody will lead this change for the new development model. Of course, people do not have the trust in any country. I'm talking with people around the Mediterranean, particularly in the Western Mediterranean countries, where I represent Italy in the Dialogue 5+5 for innovation, higher education, and research. And each time when we talk about the trust on our, let's say, leaders, our institutional, let's say, at the national level, there is always the doubt on that. So we need to build the trust. This is an important aspect that we need to do. Of course, the emerging business has been around online platforms, and you cannot imagine a lot of benefit that made the already existing big, let's say, realities and international business. And this is, let's say, regardless of this, we have also a benefit on the video conferencing. Today, we are here together. I was supposed to be in Barcelona maybe today, but we are here talking together, and we are thinking about the new model on how to face this for the higher education. That's fine. However, we need also to think about the real acceleration for the digital transformation. The way of thinking since the beginning should not be just responding to a pandemic situation like an ad hoc response. And after maybe a couple of months and years, we will come back again in waiting for the new crisis. No, we are really trying to being digital. And this is an important aspect that I think it's needs to be, let's say, mentioned. Of course, the learning management softwares, I will not mention any of those, but we have developing a lot of those and using a lot of those. Some of them are open, some of them are also with cost, so we need also to pay for that. But beside that, let's say the technology itself, we have heard also from my colleague from Tunisia about artificial intelligence. We are working so much on that. We need to develop a lot of efforts on this, because only artificial intelligence and our empowered tools could assist us to transit to this digital transformation. The jobs that we are talking about in my presentation are the blue skills, the blue jobs. And when we start this, let's say, project with the UfM, we put around the table industries, we put around the tables also students and professors, just to try to match the skills and jobs. Of course, this we think that each skill we create, we will have gaps for new skills. That's normal. That's correct. We need to then fill in this gap, and of course, we need to think out of the box with the innovation. Try to update the people with the new skills that they will find a job at any age. This is important. And when we put the plan, we think about this plan, which I really, it's very strange that I'm presenting this online, and also I'm thinking on some of these training paths will be moved or changed to online. So for example, summer school, which had been every year held here in Trieste, how we will manage on that. We are now working on that. An advanced master with the University of Trieste, so our higher education master course, a second level. We already built this path through a platform, and we trying to, of course, satisfy what we call the tailor-made training. A lot of participants from the Mediterranean, at least 27 countries have participated to our summer schools, and also 9 nationalities are present in our master. How we can deal with that? Beside the, let's say, the usual kickoff and online training that we usually offer at the beginning of the face-to-face training here in Trieste, now we enlarge the whole path is online. So we create for them as many of other platforms that has been created. I just mentioned some of them here. This year in 2020, we have a lot of events, important events that will take place online. We are building this through a learning approach, and we build for them immediately a platform. It's exclusive for our students. They can access to this platform, and they will take all the training courses through this platform. The only aspect that also was mentioned in the beginning by the Erasmus network was the mobility. Each time that we finish our training, we make what we call job shadowing, and this will allow students to be in contact with the industry and with labs. And unfortunately, this we are moving to what we say the online, but not everything that could be moving from the living labs to the digital forms. Unfortunately, people need to be in our labs. And this is how maybe the transformation should be somehow also thought in the proper way, because only with the living labs we could also increase their capacity to deal with the things. Many thank you.
Thank you so much. So thank you all for this useful, enriching contributions. I will give the floor now for a conclusion to Mrs. Itaf Ben Abdallah, Senior Advisor for Higher Education and Research at the UfM.
Merci Joao, merci à vous tous pour ce partage d'expériences très intéressant et qui nous a fait apprendre beaucoup de choses. Je partagerai avec vous quelques idées. Je vais être un peu brève pour ne pas... Je sais que vous avez beaucoup de travail à faire. Je dirais que, d'après ce que vous avez tous mentionné, que la digitalisation n'est plus un choix, mais une réalité avec laquelle nous sommes appelés à s'adapter. Mais comme vous l'avez bien mentionné, nos facultés d'adaptation pour cette nouvelle donnée n'est pas la même. C'est-à-dire, entre nos pays, on n'est pas dans la même situation qu'on se situe dans la rive, je m'excuse de le dire, c'est-à-dire qu'on soit dans la rive nord ou dans la rive sud de la Méditerranée. Et notre mandat à l'UPM ici est d'assurer cette intégration régionale et d'aider les pays qui ne peuvent pas s'adapter à ces nouvelles données à le faire. Et je crois, grâce à vos idées, à votre effort aussi, on pourrait contribuer ensemble à faire avancer les choses dans l'autre partie aussi de la Méditerranée. C'est pour cela que les travaux d'aujourd'hui seront la base pour nous, pour préparer notre action future pour la région dans le domaine de la transformation numérique, dans le domaine de l'éducation, de l'enseignement supérieur. Nous partagerons avec vous un résumé de nos travaux et de cet échange très fructueux. Nous serons ravis de recevoir vos commentaires, vos propositions d'action pour pouvoir, comme je dis toujours, d'avancer ensemble. J'ajouterai aussi et ça comme un petit commentaire, que la digitalisation ne nous empêchera pas de travailler sur d'autres thèmes qui figurent parmi nos priorités, qui sont la mobilité et également l'internationalisation de l'enseignement supérieur. Nous sommes conscients également que tous ces changements nécessitent un échange, pas seulement entre les stakeholders, entre les organisations internationales, mais également entre les politiciens. Je me permets de dire, et sous ma responsabilité, que le gap entre politiciens et stakeholders est très important, et c'est notre rôle aussi de sensibiliser les politiciens de l'importance de ces questions-là. Que puis-je dire à la fin, sauf je vous remercie encore. Vous pouvez compter sur nous ici à l'UPM, et nous, c'est grâce à vous et grâce à vos idées qu'on puisse avancer et on puisse essayer de changer un peu pour avoir un monde meilleur pour tous nos jeunes. Merci à vous. Merci.